the warmth. I like a warm colour, but I also, to a certain extent, like to, and quite often do, balance them with cold colours as well. So, for example, in another series that I've done recently, and I'm still working on, incidentally, was a series from Polish landscapes. I've just come back from spending some time in Poland, and from those I've used actually whites and purpley blues, again against some reds, which have formed something that is very living and vibrant. A painting has to live.
Are they effectively reflective of the weather in those countries that has an impacts on the environment in actual fact?
I wouldn't exactly say the weather, but to a certain extent the atmosphere that the weather creates. One painting I've done is called Morskie Oko, which was a result of a long walk, a country walk, through snow and through ice, and to arrive halfway at a station near a mountain. And there's a lake, a frozen lake, which is called Morskie Oko, which means the eye of the mountain. And suddenly I had an idea for painting, and the colour sequences were almost obvious.
I suppose thinking through that question again, perhaps I meant light rather than weather in the mountains and the snow, the parabolic mirror that you saw and influenced some of your whole period of your work, I believe, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, exactly. These were from the same type of landscape, really. These were the types of painting I did in 1978 from the south of France. Yes, exactly. I mean, that was very much a reflective idea in every sense of the word, which gave me the landscape idea plus the feeling of the landscape. So, of course, the colour combinations were, in a way, almost obvious.
And that's very suitable to your style because the sharpness of colours in snow mountains and shadows and direct lines and colour combinations.
It also gave me a freedom, too. The big problem with my work is the fact that although I'm very disciplined in that respect, I also want the freedom to make, if you like, the excitement of the original sketch. Quite often you do a sketch and it works brilliantly and you say, okay, I'll take that home and make a painting from it, and the painting just dies on you. That to my way of thinking, is because it's lost its sort of initial spontaneity, which you do have to have, I think, when being excited about a painting. So I have to try and combine the two. So although I use very free brush strokes, well, not brush strokes because I don't actually use brushes, but using free movement, I have to have that within my series of languages and shapes.
You mentioned you don't use brushes.
No.
That's a strange admission for a non-artist.
Well, well, occasionally I use brushes, but very, very occasionally. Normally I use rags dipped in the actual paint, so I squeeze the paint straight onto the rag and paint with that, and paint with that with the varying degrees of turpentine, so I know exactly. This is the whole point of this discipline, is knowing exactly what the paint will do, and that's how I have that freedom.
So the tool gives you more freedom?
Oh, very much so. I work on two sizes of paintings. One is 152 by 122 centimetres, and the other is 92 by 122. And the reason I stick to these sizes is that I know what designs will fit onto those boards. Quite a lot of the paintings I do are actually several of these panels linked, but each panel has a statement, if you want to say, in its own right, a statement to me, that is.
And do you do any more detailed work rather than with large rags and large circles and large shapes?
But within the painting, do you
Yes, and if so, do you use brushes then, or do you...
well, sometimes I use baby buds dipped in the paint, which I find that then you can actually draw in paint. So you have once again a freedom, which is what... the big problem about painting at all, which I incidentally find very hard work, is the fact that you can be restricted. And in that way it inhibits you, it inhibits your subject. So what I like to do is, in effect, be as free as possible, absolutely as free as possible. And then when the painting is finished, even if it's unfinished, if it's finished to me, then the atmosphere of that painting has been created, and that's it, it's ready.
You mentioned earlier you had two strands, dimensions, the black and white and the colour.
Right.
Many people would say, well, black and white sketching precedes a colour representation, which I know not to be the case. But what was it in your case?
Well, the whole idea was that, as I said before, I wanted to, in a way, to have not a style exactly, but a way of expressing something. I wasn't really worried about the technique, but I was worried about, in a way, the actual method of transferring an idea from my mind, if you want, to a board. So I experimented for several years using just black and white, which meant that I had to rely on my drawing, if you like. I mean, drawing is extremely important to me. Basic drawing, that is, a traditional drawing. And so I only had to rely on the shapes and the sort of rhythm and the shapes between the shapes, if you like. So it had to have a sort of continuity from one side of the board to the other. Had I added colour at that time, it would have ruined the whole thing. It would have given a balance which I didn't want. I knew that putting a large red shape or a large green shape would do something, but that would change the balance, and I didn't want that.
You mentioned drawing there, and yet now, would you say you don't do any drawing at all?
Not really, no, I don't. No.
Drawing implies a kind of
occasionally,
detail and a fineness and a control that perhaps, well, my control's wrong. You can still have control at that level.
Well, yes, I mean, I believe, again for myself, I believe in traditional drawing. At art college, one spent several hours a week traditionally drawing life drawing, still life and studio work. And I think actually that's, to me anyway, that's really grammar of abstract work. Has been for me.
So you have grammar. Grammar implies language, language implies communication. What are you trying to tell me in your paintings?
What am I trying to tell you? Well, in a way, I have to admit, I think painters really paint for themselves. I certainly do. I don't mean that in a selfish way, although it is a selfish remark to a certain extent. I don't think anybody in a gallery or whatever can really see what you're getting at, get into the mind of the actual sort of original concept. You can say you like the painting, you don't like the painting, you have a rapport with it or whatever. But I don't think one can ever actually fully understand the original idea. So I'm really painting a painting that in a way pleases me, and if it's finished, it's finished. If other people like it, yes, I'm very pleased, obviously. But I think that's really all you can say.
So you're expressing rather than communicating?
Yes.
When you've expressed something, how do you judge the success in your own terms now?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. Sometimes, well, everybody has always overworked a painting. The secret, I suppose, is to know when to stop. That is a problem. I always underwork paintings. And although I work in a way quite fast, I have sort of breaks where I sit and just stare at a painting and say, well, is this finished or isn't it? Does it need this to be added or not? And will it be the richer or the poorer for having this mark being put there? And quite often you can say, well, yes, this needs a mark, it needs a shape or something. You put it there and it's wrong. You've ruined the paint. You can tell.
You can't subtract?
Yes, you can. I mean, but this, of course, is a lengthy process, and I like, in a way, to be, in a way, if I can use a contradiction, almost a sort of planned spontaneity. So, in a way, that really rather goes against the grain. I like to be able to know that I put that mark in the right place, and it is right. Of course, every paint doesn't work. I mean, if it doesn't work, then
what do you do if it doesn't work?
Paint over it.
Paint over it.
Paint over it.
Abolish it.
Yes, yes. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And yet you talked about series earlier on. So a painting exists in its own right, but exists within a greater whole.
That's right. I mean, there are paintings that another series I've done from Polish Ideas is a triptych, which are directly related, and they will always hopefully be hung together. They need to be hung together. They rely on each other. But there are some paintings which are part of a series, which, as you say, is a painting in its own right and can be left on its own. But I feel like any form of discussion group, any form of language, which a painting is really in a way, that the idea must be worked through to its conclusion.
When you say they have to be hung together, do they have to be hung in a certain order?
Yes.
They must be?
Oh yes, they don't work any other way.
Right.
Yes,
is that because, for me looking at them, I need to see the progression through them, or because they make a complete tapestry? Or some other reason? Well,
in a way, both. There are certain stages within a series of paintings which are obvious. I mean, my paintings are quite obvious. They're quite bold objects within the paintings, and you can tell quite obviously how they progress. With a triptych, of course, they have also to be related in a certain way. But having said that, with a series of paintings, you could take one out, and it should stand up on its own. Your paintings are quite large, aren't they? Yes, they're made up of panels. As I said earlier, they're made up of panels of either 92 by 122 centimetres. Does that mean that they have to be large? You obviously prefer them to be large, but could you express yourselves in a miniature? Well, I do to a certain extent as a rough sort of kick-off. I do a lot of poster paint sketches, which are not the painting itself. They're things in their own right, but they're in a way like a sort of mid-stage between the idea and just to get a rough idea what the paintings will look like. I was telling you about this triptych that I did from Poland. They're mostly blue with just one or two black, white and red marks on them. Now I had to find out if those black, white and red marks are going to look right, even if on the finished painting they're going to be slightly different. I wanted to know actually if that combination looked right. It did in my mind, but would it look right in the sketch? So if when I put these three pieces of paper together in the studio, the answer is just they did, and that's how I came to do it.
If you had a series of three and the third one didn't work,
keep changing it until you...
Will you keep changing it to try and recreate it, or will you? Do you ever accept that you can't achieve can transfer what's up there?
No, I know when it'll work. It's just getting it right. There are paintings which I know will only work in threes, and it's just a matter of getting it right. That's the idea of doing these poster paint sketches, really, to make sure that roughly what it's going to look like.
So I'm thinking now of someone that's a young artist and so on. That if something's not going right, I mean, what strategies do you have to cope with that and to overcome that, or do you leave it for another day? Do you come back, work at it?
That's quite often a good idea, actually, to sleep on it. Yes, I often do that. If you're working late into the night, which I often do, you can get overtired and not think straight and ruin a painting. Oh no, it's nothing. Or you just simply go on to another painting for a while and think about something else. I quite often work on two paintings.
If you were doing a particular painting, do you always start at a particular point on the canvas?
No, I don't think so. I've never thought about it. I don't really think so, but I know where... I mean, I work in a sequence of colours, so for example, I know that I'm going to put the lighter colours on first, for the simple reason if you put on, say, an ultramarine or a black, even more importantly than that, you can't really, on the board, think of anything else, so that dominates the work. So I'll probably start with something like a yellow of one sort or other. Or
so for technical reasons, there's an order of priority for colours going down on canvas, but not of object or not of position.
No, that's right, that's right.
So you couldn't therefore start from... what I'm trying to get at is, if something wasn't working, could you come at it from a different angle and it may work differently, or do you always approach it from the same mental picture?
I think, yes, I would always approach it from the beginning sort of concept, because I know it will work. It's just that I might not be capable of doing it at that time. You know, there are some shapes which you just feel good with, and you know they work.
What's the worst scenario that you had to redraw a picture, repaint a picture before you got it right?
Well, I've been working on one very recently. I got the idea from just looking out of a coach window on the way back through Belgium, and I just got the idea immediately. It was a type of landscape, but it was also using unusual colours for a landscape. It was blues, reds and whites, and it had some shapes that I felt that I wanted to do in it, which were a real problem. But I knew it would work eventually, and I did several sketches for this, and on the painting itself I worked on it for hours and hours, and I was on the point of actually destroying it, but yet I could see that it still had something that I wanted, so I didn't really want to start right from the beginning, so I just left it for a few hours, came back and I saw the shapes that were needed, and now it worked. I'm very happy with it.
You saw the shapes, that you saw parts of it that were right?
Yes.
And you worked on the other parts?
Yes, that's right, yes. I mean, there was a large area, for example, which sort of crept in from the left-hand side, which was black, and it had sort of colours butting into it. But quite simply, to tell you, the paintings were butting in at the wrong angle. It was as simple as that. But I couldn't see that until I did it. It's obvious once I'd done it. And it was right, it looked right. And it's worked.
You painted a large number of works of art over 20 odd years?
Yeah, 30 odd.
30 odd years.
Yes.
You can't keep them all on your living room walls. What happens to them, and which ones do you keep?
Well, this is a difficult question. I mean, I put them into store, obviously, and they're photographed and then they're stored. I don't actually have too many paintings around the house of my own. I don't like paintings all over the place. I just have one or two paintings which I know, which I'm happy with. One particular one I have, which I think I painted in 1978, and it's just one it's not a very large one actually, and that's been on the wall for more or less all that time.